Commissioner Hale,
Here.
Commissioner Venetian,
Here.
President Camargo,
Here.
Commissioner La.
Here.
Next item, please.
2, consent items. 2A, the approval of the April 3rd, 2017 meeting minutes.
Changes, anybody have changes they'd like to make to the meeting minutes?
No changes.
No changes. Or accepted as is.
3, GWP Commission staff and comments.
Mr. Zurn?
None, Mr. President.
Anyone? No comment. Okay, moving along. Next item on the agenda, please.
4A, legislative update.
Hi, President Camargo, members of the Commission, April Fitzpatrick, Assistant General Manager. I'm here today to present you with yet another legislative update. There is a lot happening right now with Congress back in session. On the federal side, an item to note is, of course, our President's released his tax reform proposal. And based on this new plan, it appears that the bond exception for municipalities are not protected. So for Glendale, if we have to pay taxes on the municipal bond interest, it may add cost to our capital improvement projects, forcing us to limit them. And it also may potentially make us raise rates in the future. The Trump administration is working on the proposed tax plan for the next month with their stakeholders, and they're hoping to fine-tune the details so that it can pass in both chambers. On the state side, there's a huge list of bills that may affect Glendale. On the energy side, I want to share with you 2 of the Aliso Canyon bills that were introduced by Senator Zurn. Both of them are urgency bills, with the first one being SB 57, the natural gas storage moratorium. This particular bill delays the reopening of the facility until a root cause analysis is completed. If approved, this moratorium would be limited to injections only on an emergency situation as deemed by our governor. Glendale would like to see clearly defined language as to what is an emergency so that we can ensure reliability for our customers. The second bill, SB 801, also by Zurn, addresses energy storage solutions. There are 2 things to this bill. The first one being LADWP to procure 100 megawatts of storage, and it also would potentially require the utilities in the LA Basin to submit electric grid data to the California Public Utilities Commission upon request to target solutions to support reliability. Glendale has concerns with this particular bill, being that if we have to potentially report to the CPUC, it would be something new for us because we are not regulated by them currently. These bills have now moved on to the Senate Appropriations Committee. The next bill, SB 584 de Leon, is the California Renewables Portfolio Standard program that I've shared with you previously. And as you recall, this bill would accelerate the 50% renewables portfolio standard to 2025 instead of the 2030 original date, as well as set a 100% RPS goal by 2045. As you know, this is very concerning to Glendale, how we could potentially manage 100%. We are waiting for new text to be released any day now. With regard to cap and trade bills, there are quite a few out there that are post-2020 at the state level being considered currently. Glendale would like to see it go beyond 2020, and recently the governor's office started meeting with stakeholders trying to reach a pre-budget resolution in June. There are 2 particular bills we're watching very closely. The first one is the AB 378 Garcia bill, as well as the AB 151 Burke bill titled Global Warming Solutions. Glendale sees both of these bills as a way to extend the program. However, there are considerable differences in each set of legislation. The Garcia bill aims at protecting the most impacted and areas of disadvantaged communities. It has amendments for emission reductions at large stationary sources through individual facility caps and no trade zones, whereas the Burke bill requires the Air Resource Control Board to report the legislature to receive input and guidance before adopting new regulations on scoping plans. Both of these bills have moved on to the Assembly appropriations as work in progress, and both authors are trying to address concerns that have been brought forward so far. On the water side, I just have one item to share with you, and that's the governor's draft trailer bill that was submitted recently, making conservation of California a way of life. It's an extensive document, and if it's approved, it will fast-track many of the separate bills that we've been keeping an eye on and implement many of the items that the State Water Board wanted to do under the emergency order that our governor recently lifted. We're monitoring the detailed bills through our membership with the Association of California Water Agencies, as well as the California Municipal Utilities Association. So this concludes my presentation. We're watching all of these bills as well as many others, and we will be sure to report back to you as soon as there are any changes that will potentially affect Glendale Water and Power.
Let me just add that we are actively involved in some of these to a very high degree. The bond issue is something when we were back in Washington with APPA, we made well known to all of the legislators we met with, including Congressman Schiff, who's well aware of that. Our sense is that it's not getting a lot of look right now, but it'll probably be one of those that goes down to the wire because the impact is just great to municipalities for any number of reasons, not the least of which is large infrastructure spending. The Aliso Canyon bills, we are working with SCPPA on how to best address that issue. Here's our concern. There's certainly a humanistic, social, and health-related issue that we want to be extremely sensitive to. It's not our intention to poke holes in that. At the same time that any evaluation that's done, we want to make sure it includes, that it is complete, that it is very factual, and in that includes the reliability issue of electrical utilities. So we just want to make sure that story gets told. Decision made after that, that's fine. We just want to make sure that story gets told for the benefit of our customers and the customers of all the POUs and IOUs in this particular area. For SCPPA, it's not the whole membership. LA, Glendale, Burbank, Pasadena, Vernon, and Anaheim are the cities that are impacted by this basin. So stay tuned. We are still talking. I was on a conference call till the moment I walked over here discussing this particular issue. And then the De Leon bill on the 100% renewable. It shows here as 584. We had heard they were going to renumber it to 100, which sounds. But this is the extent of the information that's been released. He's waiting for, I think, some other things to clear at an opportune moment. And outside of the dates, they have indicated that it is simply an increase in the percentage of the portfolio. Nothing else will change. It is firm, a mandate, not a goal to seek. So, as April indicated, that'll be a very interesting bill when it comes in, and you know, it will change greatly how we do business, and it likely will impact customers in a number of different ways, not the least of which is financially. But as some have said, it's a cost to pay to improve the environment, and so we just want to make sure that our folks are well informed of what's going on. So it'll be our job to get out and make sure that word's there. The cap and trades is a concern, especially 378, and we're staying on top of that with both our staff and outside staff, as April indicated, and we'll continue to look at that, affecting not only us today, but actually affecting our repower as well. So we want to make sure that we stay tuned on that. And the governor's budget trailer bill, you know, as April said, it took the water issues and pretty much engulfed them and put them in there, which is fine. I mean, it is what it is, so we'll see where this all ends up. So, but just as a side note, we are staying very active, much more active on some than others, but staying very active.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Zurn.
you.
Thank you, Ms. Fitzpatrick. Any questions before we
Yeah, well,
move
I
on?
just wanted to know, does that municipal bond bill that's working its way through Congress, does that seem to have any play among the members because
Commissioner Hale, the best I can say is it was something that they had considered previously under the Obama administration. So, to the extent that that could mean that it has bipartisan, as much as there is any bipartisan opinion on anything, it may be. But now the whole dynamic has changed, so it seems that if you take a side one way or the other side is going to take a polar opposite position. So will there be a fight? But I think there is some on the Republican side. There is some support to eliminate that tax exemption.
Yeah, it's hard to forecast these things. I just can't imagine that any member in any district could come back home, face their local electeds, and say this was the right thing to do.
And I think you're absolutely right.
So I that transcends partisan issues because it doesn't really matter whether you're coming from a particularly conservative state or a liberal one. You go back home and your local jurisdictions can't, do infrastructure projects as easily anymore, and there's no win there. There's no upside.
And I would agree with you. I think this has been lobbed at the very top level and has not quite gotten down yet. And when that happens, as I said, you'll watch this thing go, and all of a sudden you'll see it becomes very popular and a lot of attention's given to it, and it ends up being okay.
Yeah.
That's my thought, for the very reasons you said.
Anything else on this topic? Okay, very good. Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
4B, customer service update.
President Camargo and members of Commission, I'm Tammy Valier, Customer Services Administrator. I'm here today to give you a brief update on the customer service operation. In the Contact and Payment Center, these are some of the performance measures we track, and I'll go through them with you and explain what they are and what our targets are. Some of them you're familiar with from prior presentations that I've given. The average handle time is the time spent on the phone with a customer and any required tasks after the call has ended. We have a target of 5 minutes and 30 seconds, and our current performance is 5 minutes and 43 seconds, so we're very close to our target. The average speed of answer, we would like to answer phone calls 90 seconds or less, and we are currently at 1 minute and 20 seconds. For average talk time, is the average talk time industry standard is 3 minutes and 5 seconds. I'm sorry, 3.5 minutes. And we're currently at a little over 4 minutes. So we're very close to that time. The reason you see that shaded, I've spoken about this previously. Right now we're emphasizing call quality, first call resolution. We're trying to promote programs and services. So we're not really being really strict on the talk time. We're trying to keep the after talk time down, which we've reduced, and I'll show you a little bit later in the slide how well we've done there. For call abandonment rate, our target is less than 4%. We're currently at 5%. We've made a lot of improvements in this area, and again, I'll show you a slide later to talk about what we've done there. Our service level is answering 70% of our calls within 30 seconds, and currently we're answering 62% of our calls within 30 seconds. And then finally on web request, this is how long it takes us to respond to customers who are sending us emails through our eCare site, through the website, through our mobile app, through the city's customer service request system. And we have a target of responding to these within 48 hours, and currently we're responding to 80% of them within 48 hours.
So a question before you move on, if I may. So on the average talk time, the shaded one there, I appreciate that there is a goal and there's an industry average, but your focus, as I hear it, is on quality. Do you have a qualitative or quantitative metric that you use to assess the quality of those contacts?
We do. We have a call monitoring for our agents. We just revised that program, and currently they are monitoring 10 calls per month for each agent, and then we calibrate those with each other to make sure that we're all in sync on how we're scoring the customer service reps. And that's about it. That's what we're doing right now.
Very good. Okay.
Now, I have another question here. So is this all in English, or you have some translations as well? I mean, if somebody speaks, for example, Spanish, do you have somebody to translate that?
We do. So we have Armenian Spanish speakers throughout our customer service division. We have several for each language. And then if we're doing our call monitoring, we'll have one of the senior reps monitor a staff member with if they pull 10 calls and 3 of those calls are in Armenian and that lead only speaks English, then we'll pull another lead to listen to those 3 calls. All of the calls that we monitor are random, so it's not like if we get an Armenian call, we would just move on until we got another English call. We make sure that those 10 random calls are the 10 calls that are monitored. Does that answer your question?
Thanks.
Okay. All right. And then for billing, a few of the important measures, of course, is billing accuracy, and this is the percent of accurate bills mailed, and we have a target of 98 or more of our bills should be mailed out accurately, and we're currently at 99.9%, which is excellent. For daily billing, this is bills that post within 2 days of the meter read date, and our target is to have all bills posted within 2 days, and we are meeting that target of 100%. That is with exception to the exceptions, which are the bills that fall out of the regular daily billing because of abnormal usage or possibly a read that we didn't get, it came back without a read. All of those have to be manually investigated. Some of them have to be investigated in the field. So we have a target of billing and posting those and completing the investigation within 10 days. And so we would like to see 98% of those completed in 10 days, and we're at 96%. And there can be a variety of reasons as why we don't meet that target. It could be a lengthy investigation. There might need to be a meter test involved, a variety of different things. And then finally, the meter exchanges, installs, or removals. We would like greater than 98% of these to be office completed within 5 days of the field work. An example of this is, for example, if we have a new apartment building with new construction and we have to put 50 meters in that building. The field work gets completed, but all of those meters, all that information, all that data now has to be put into the customer information system. So we need time in the office to do that. We like to complete those within 5 days, and we're at 97% there. And then finally, our write-off to revenue, a goal of less than 0.2%, and our rate is 0.1%. So again, we're doing very good there. Any questions on these before I move on?
Yeah, so when you're talking about these percentages, I'm assuming that the staff number is the same. You're not increasing the staff number, or?
I'm sorry, I'm not following that question.
You're improving your efficiency. Does your staff number increase?
No. These are improvements made without any staff increases.
Okay.
So just for an example of how we've made some improvements, this slide is just the number of contacts that we have had for the last 2 years, and then what we're projecting for this year, which is relatively the same. It's a little bit less than the last 2 years, but pretty much the same. But you can see that our abandoned calls have decreased from 8% and 9% the prior 2 years, and we're currently at 5%. And a lot of this has to do with internal improvements that we've made regarding our overflow call management. We've always had a process, but we've formalized that. It has to do with both customers becoming more knowledgeable with some of our codes, such as the mandatory water conservation, which were a lot of the calls over the last 2 years, and so we don't have as many lengthy calls related to that. And our internal staff is becoming more and more knowledgeable and comfortable with the information as well. So they are executing the calls quicker so that they can get to the next call quicker as well. And you can see this with the average telephone handle time as well, where we've reduced it by almost a full minute, or actually a little bit more than a full minute over the last 2 years. And then finally, this is our service level. The 70% of the calls answered within 30 seconds. Last year, we only were at 55% being answered within 30 seconds, and we're at 62% now. So we have made some improvements, and but we're still working on meeting some of those targets, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
No, thanks.
I'm just curious to know if there's, I mean, this looks very good, and it looks like the targets that you've set, you're really meeting. I'm just wondering if, from your own perspective, kind of being in the trenches and doing this work every day, is there anything that you particularly would like to focus on? Or even an area of success where you think, okay, so the target says I could do this, but I'm actually wanting to do that?
Well, I think the service level, for years, the service level was always 80% in 20 seconds. But what we've seen with peer agencies is that it is 70% now in 30 seconds. So I would really like to focus more on first call resolution, and that's what we are trying to do internally. We don't have a good mechanism right now to measure that, and we're working on doing that with some technology improvements. But for me, that would probably be the number one thing that I'd like to see improved.
Great, thanks.
Let me, Mr. President, members of the commission, let me just also add to that. We've just initiated a review and study of the customer service operation. So in these days of modernization, and we've changed a lot of the way we do business, we've brought somebody in to take a long look at how we are doing things and how we might be able to do them better, and if there are things that we can procure to make our life and Tammy's life easier, to look at our staffing levels both ways, and to see if there's any processes that we can improve on to provide a higher level of service, especially in a changing environment. So we just initiated that, and we'll probably be done with that.
11 weeks, and we're 1 week, so 10 more weeks.
Once we get that complete and have a final report, we'll report out to you folks about what we found. That'll probably be Tammy's customer service report for that particular meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Excellent.
So follow-up question, do you, I don't recall if you use JD Power or some other independent party to help with customer service assessments?
No, the only, we use RKS for customer satisfaction surveys.
Okay. Very good. Okay, anything else? Very good, thank you. Madam Clerk, may we have the next item, please?
4C, Water Conservation Update and Drought Charge.
President Camargo, members of the commission, my name is Michael Neghetto, Chief AGM for Water at Glendale Water and Power, and I'm going to give a water conservation update. So from May of 2015 through March of 2017, GWP's customers have saved 3.6 billion gallons of water. We're currently in phase 2, which limits outdoor watering to 3 days per week. And at next week's council meeting, we're recommending moving to phase 1 at that May 9th meeting. And in our phase 1, all the no water waste rules remain in effect. And I'll go over those a little bit. I'll highlight what some of those rules are. And like I showed last month, when we talked about that purple line, so this is a monthly production by year. So each line is a different year. And the purple line is 2017, and so we had a very wet January and February. We had really low numbers. And like I had speculated, I think around that last time I gave this report back in April, March had been kind of warm. And so sure enough, our production in March did go up. But I would predict that, we're still going to be well below those old 14 and 13 numbers, just even during the summer. So we might be above that green line, but below those two blue lines, based on a lot of the permanent landscaping changes that customers have made. And when I talk about phase 1, which is our no water waste policy, so again, there's no hose washing of hardscapes with some exceptions. You got to minimize overspray and runoff. Like your sprinklers, basically you have to set your sprinklers so they're not watering the sidewalk and they're just watering your plants. You can only use decorative fountains with recirculation systems. You've got to fix leaks on your premises within 72 hours. Irrigation times are still between 6 p.m. and 9 a.m. And you need to turn off your irrigation on windy days and when it's raining or within 48 hours of rain. And then vehicle washing, it's restricted. You got to have a handheld bucket and quickly rinse it with a hose with a shut-off nozzle. And then there's another series of restrictions related to commercial customers. And the Glendale Municipal Code 13.36 is about water conservation. It lists all the details. It's a couple pages worth of things related to that. And then again on our website, we've got water saving tips on our site. There's news at the bewaterwise.com, and then there's residential and commercial rebate programs at the SoCal Water Smart. And that's it. I've got a really short presentation today, so any questions?
Questions or comments? Nope, hearing none.
Oh, no, I do. We've had so many great conversations over the last couple of years about what will we do when the drought ends.
Yeah.
And I know that the snowpack right now in Northern California is exceptionally high, way above average, and now we expect large amounts of water to be melting from the snow, coming downhill, and replenishing. I'm just so deeply concerned that GWP and your staff specifically have put so much effort into retraining all of us as citizens of the city to conserve. How do we keep the message of conservation going strong, facing the types of uncertainty that we're facing with our climate and with future water availability when we go back to phase one? So just talk me through it, because I've expressed my fears to you in the past about what are we going to do when the drought ends. Because I've noticed just in my own neighborhood, I live in an area with a lot of single-family homes, and over the years, everyone really fell into lockstep. And I know because I walked my dog at the time when people should be turning their sprinklers on. And over the years, it took such a long time, but boy, they are like ducks in a row now. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. I never see people watering Mondays, Wednesdays. They got the message. So with all of that good work in place and that what I would call an incredibly successful effort on the behalf of the utility to educate its customers, how do we then go back to a more generous watering schedule without undoing, unpicking the entire quilt? Does that make sense?
President Camargo, Commissioner Lal, part of what you're getting to, though, is everyone's choice as a customer. So I think it's incumbent upon customers to adopt and hold that conservation kind of mindset. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of things that'll happen is that permanent change, and maybe folks have gotten the message. Like I said, I always remember you got to turn off the lights when you leave the room, back from the energy crisis when I was small, and I think it's like that with the water. The other part of that is, I would imagine that customers have gotten very used to their bill, and that's quite frankly, one thing I pay a lot of attention to. I pay a lot of attention to the electric bill and the water bill. And if you move away from that 3 days a week, and you start watering more, your bill's going to go up. That's definitely something I think for customers to pay more attention to as well. Now, as part of our upcoming cost of service analysis, we're going to look at some different options related to watering days. And of course, the drought charge and those sorts of things when we do that whole cost of service analysis. And we'll look at that and maybe have some recommendations related to that. One thing, and I realized like the message was very simple about what days you can water, but because we have fully implemented the AMI, we actually do have more flexibility, maybe to allow 3 days a week, but it's the 3 days that work out for you. Those are the kind of things we can look for. The other part of that is, those phase 1, no water waste, is still in line with the governor's continuing order as part of his emergency order. And it's, I guess, how do I say that? That a lot of those things there that are listed in that no water waste was where a lot of the water went in the past, before paying attention to that. So the issue had really been, we keep talking about drought, and it had really been a water supply shortage is what it truly was. And I think even as an industry changing our messaging a little bit away from drought and looking at the drought map and all those kind of things, there was really a water supply shortage. So we might look at those kind of things too as far as updating the ordinance, because even those restrictions about going when we were in phase 3 to 2 days a week, that could be if there was a break in the State Water Project aqueduct, even if there wasn't a drought.
Or some kind of crisis up north.
Right.
That would affect the movement of water around the state. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right.
So I mean, those restrictions are the same kind of restrictions we would use for a water supply shortage, regardless of what the trigger with that is.
Got it. That's really helpful.
Okay. And the only the only thing I would add to that is there's one thing about being like having the foresight as a city to join Metropolitan and have a regional water supplier like that. Helps to the extent that by having two sources, having State Water Project water and Colorado River water, when one of those sources has an abundance, that really helps shift the supplies and rebuild the supplies that are available to MWD. Even during the drought and the governor's order, implemented their allocation plan, and it was actually much less restrictive than the governor's order. And I think as a region in Southern California, by being part of that regional supplier, we didn't actually have to do such drastic cutbacks as the governor had asked us to do. So that's again always something to keep in mind, where we can trigger those mandatory phases when we really need to.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like what you're describing is that fundamentally, if we change, for instance, the watering allocation, GWP customers have kind of learned the lesson and have fundamentally internalized this changed relationship with water. And certainly they've seen it reflected in their bills. So one would hope that they would not immediately revert to a 2009 or 2010 consumption pattern.
Yeah, I would think so, because your bill would definitely change compared to what it's been over the last year or so.
Yeah.
And they have seen that that's a plentiful amount of water to keep whatever it is green that they want to keep green.
Right.
So
Yeah, 3 days a week.
You don't have
it.
to have mushrooms on your lawn in order for your lawn to be green.
And 3 days a week, everything won't die.
Right.
So my guess is, and not to mention, it's just difficult to change your timer. So I'm guessing that we aren't going to see a lot of drop off. I think you're going to see a new plateau. You'll see it go up a little bit. It'll probably go up. The predictions are this is going to be a very hot summer in comparison to what we've had. So you might see it go up a little there. But, what Mike says is absolutely true. Not to mention, to add to what he says, we will not stop the message. So we won't be beating the drought drum as much as we'll be beating the conservation drum that you should be practicing all the time. So the messaging will continue to go out. It'll continue to go out about watering.
So images like this. With okay.
Yes. So we will continue to do that and continue to tie it to the rate and continue to give people options on how to greater improve their conservation. So that's
Right.
not something that just is a drought-only type of
Okay.
a program.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that, Mr. DeGhetto.
Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, next agenda item, please.
4D, Renewable Portfolio Update.
So, Mr. President, members of the commission, I have this up here for you, and I included it in your packages. But each year, annually, in the July-August area, we come back with an RPS, a Renewable Portfolio Standard update that shows where we are, what the previous year has looked like, what some of our planning is. And so I've included that. So this data has not changed dramatically since we gave it to you this past August. Quite frankly, we are looking good for the original milestone of 2020, 33% by 2020. That's obviously changed. But I can tell you this past year and the past several months, our efforts have been focused primarily on the Grayson Repower. So we have dabbled a little bit in discussions with especially SCPPA on some projects that are out there. There's a couple of projects that I'd like to at least talk a little bit more about with some agencies on the developers. But at this point in time, we're pretty tried and true with where we are. And by this next August, we'll give you a little bit better idea. We'll give you an idea of what the market's like. But at this point in time, we haven't made a lot of improvements over what we showed you this past August. We obviously have our IRP, which was originally developed with the 50% RPS in mind. So that's our plan, if you will, for going forward. And we are now in the process of looking at bringing a consultant back to upgrade that to the 100%, just so we can see what those impacts are. And the Grayson Repower is going to have a tremendous influence on this, tremendous influence. So that is a key. Before we start going out and entering into long-term 30-year agreements for renewable energy, we would like to get to next May, which is the council's critical decision point with the Grayson Repower. If it goes one way, it's going to change radically how we do our renewable portfolio. If it goes the other way, it will also radically change, but in a different way. So that's really a critical point. So we've not gotten too far into any, like I said, long-term commitments at this point. We are looking for opportunities on the spot market to buy, and prices have been decent. So to the extent that we can replace, we do. Coal at San Juan will be retired at the end of this year. Coal at IPP will be retired in 2025 at the latest. So we need to look at replacing those as well, but that is certainly cleaning up your portfolio. There is some debate. The one area of debate in the 100% RPS has been what are we going to do with hydro and how that's going to be counted. So are they going to bring the issue of Hoover back and some of the other hydro projects that had been exempted previously or had been taken out of the mix because they weren't allowed to be grandfathered in. So that'll be interesting. And there may be opportunities in the Pacific North for more hydro projects. We'll see.
Question along those lines is, any current thinking or discussion around potentially having nuclear count as part of the RPS?
Nobody has been brave enough to bring that up. I would certainly, based on the nuclear that we have in our portfolio, I've said to our staff before, I'd love to have more of that from that plant, especially, but that's not going to happen. But like I said, nobody has been brave enough to bring that up seriously, other than some side conversations at this point.
There is, I can't recall, I think New York, somewhere back east where there's a bill that is being proposed that would allow nuclear to be considered among the renewable portfolio.
I think, Mr. President, back east and in the South, they're a lot more coal dependent than we are, and so depending on what happens with the new administration now, it's a whole different situation with that. But based on the Clean Power Plant Act and the fact that coal was beginning to go away, they were really hurting. I mean, they didn't have the kind of solar opportunities we did and the wind opportunities we did. So it was looking like, nuclear was how they were going to be able to survive if they were going to get off coal, and even if they were going to get off oil. As you know, back east, they still use oil for different purposes. So that will be interesting. But out here, I hadn't heard that. Actually, some of the rumblings we heard was more along the lines of, well, look what SCE did, look what PG&E did. Let's just get out of that business altogether. And anybody who has interest in nuclear, and I would hate for that to happen, because the small amount that we do is very, very efficient and very reliable. So.
And can you explain a little bit more about the hydro, because it's not considered renewable now, right?
When the RPS first came up, there was a drive for those of us who are members of Hoover to use Hoover. So the kind of comment just to not elaborate too much, but the comment was, well, if you want the hydro to count, and we should have thought about it at the time, if you want Hoover to count, then instead of 33%, we're going to make it 40%. We should have said yes. Mm-hmm. Knowing where things were going, we should have said, that's automatic. Okay. That's a no-brainer. But at the time, folks were a little concerned, oh, God. And so they said, you count Hoover, it goes up. You don't count Hoover, we'll stay at 33%. But now, and when we did SB 350, Hoover came back into the mix and didn't get included again. And Hoover's where we're at, but there is a couple of others, I understand, hydro projects that folks wanted to see if they could get involved in. Large hydro is where the issue is.
So the threshold is still 25 megawatts of hydro, right?
Yes.
So it's new or old small hydro.
Correct. Small.
So it's small. Right. Small. That was the dividing line. Is if the project was less than 25 megawatts or less, it could count. But anything above 25 megawatts, and Hoover is 1.6 gigawatts, I think. So it's
total. Yes.
Yeah, the total project size. So that would never have counted under the state RPS definition. But it's good to hear that the new hydro still counts. It's just it has to be smaller projects.
Right. So in Glendale, we have a small project in Pacific Northwest, Hyaton, and that one counts in our portfolio.
Oh, okay.
So it's expensive, but it counts. And we're actually going to see about taking advantage of that particular facility this year and the Pacific Northwest. You mentioned the snowpack in California. Apparently the snowpack in the Pacific Northwest is even greater. And their temperatures aren't rising. So they think it's going to melt a lot slower. So it's going to be available maybe all summer long. So we'll see if we can't take advantage of that, which would be a renewable purchase, at least when you're looking at bucket 1, bucket 2, bucket 3 type scenarios. So that's a case where we wouldn't go out and enter into a long-term agreement, but we could take advantage of the conditions and import more of that to our facility as long as we have transmission capacity, which is always an issue.
And then looking ahead toward a potential 100%, is it likely that the whole discussion around Hoover would come up again?
Yes, I'm sure in these discussions Hoover's going to come up again.
It has to,
because
otherwise we would have to over-procure. We would have to replace that power with something that met the textbook or the statutory definition of renewable.
Correct.
And replace the Hoover power, which is already carbon-free, with something else that was also carbon-free.
Correct. Which also, we would have to do the same thing with Palo Verde, the nuclear plant, because that wouldn't get counted. We'd have it, but we'd have to overbuy in order to compensate for that on a 100% basis.
Interesting.
Right.
Okay, so this is going to be a really interesting conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And transmission for us, as you know, is a big issue. So again, this is where the Grayson Repower comes in. To the extent that we can meet our base load with local generation, non-transmitted local generation, that frees what generation we do have up to bring in nothing but our renewables, which is where we're probably going to have to be, not to put anybody into a corner, but that puts us in a really advantageous situation. It's just another one of the things to consider when you're looking at the repower. So with that, I'll entertain any specific questions. We will be back to see you in it'll probably be the August meeting, and the way it works with the commission because of the once-a-month meeting, it'll likely be August again. We'll be back. I think we finished the report. Usually we try to get it done right after the 1st of July, but we'll be back to you probably at the August meeting as soon as we have that report complete and give you an update and a forecast. And we may by then have our IRP, the Integrated Resource Plan, updated to the 100% scenario and see where we're at. And we'll certainly have a lot more information on where 100% is Sacramento-wise, although I think we all know where it's going.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Zurn. Any further comments or questions? Nope. Very good. Thanks again. Okay, Madam Clerk, next item.
5, oral communications.
I have no cards. None? Okay. Next item, please.
6, agenda forecast.
So one thing we can look at is a date other than the 3rd of July for the July meeting.
Should we push it out a week?
We can do that. Do you guys want to check your schedule? Because that's usually a heart of vacation month. So, I mean, we don't have to do it now, but we could push it out a week or two even. I mean, it starts to bump up a little bit to the next meeting. But if everybody's good with the week after 4th of July, then, or the week after the 3rd, I should say. Tentatively the 10th, we can check calendars and see. We're okay with that.
That works for me, but I'd be happy to confirm at the next meeting if we want to.
Works for me.
And I can have, Ms. Lee will confirm with everybody, but if
Okay.
we'll just tentatively say we're going to push it to the 10th, and unless we can't get a quorum, that
Sounds like we can get a quorum, so yeah, let's go ahead and push that. Okay, so we'll adjust the date for the July meeting. Any other comments on the forecast? Commissioner Lal.
No, I think it looks fine.
Okay, very good. Next item, please.
7, adjournment.
You get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Very good. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you so much.